feel?
Go ahead. Go right ahead.
All right. Hello. I am Talina di Giuseppe d'Appiazzole. I am from the Barony of Rivenoak, which is in Sinagua, here in the Kingdom of the West. And tonight we're going to talk about the who, what, when, where, and why of largesse making. Funny story. I did not tell Sarah this was my first slide. She just guessed that on the name for the event because apparently we have one mind. I had already written this slide. Um, so I am not sure what makes me qualified to teach about this, but I love making largesse. And one of the things that I noticed when I sort of switched sides from just being a largesse maker to somebody who needed to deal with largesse and give largesse as a landed baroness and previously as a head of court, one of the things I realized is it changed a little bit of my perspective about this process of making and giving largesse. So I wanted to kind of share that. And also because I do make a ton of largesse, also a little bit of how we kind of keep that fun. Because as with all things, we remember that this is a hobby and it's supposed to be fun. Oh, I have to figure out how to advance my slides and move the bar. I'm a professional, I swear. All right, so largesse. Largesse as the actual word is commonly listed as one of the like chivalric or knightly virtues, but essentially it's generosity. There's a little definition there. Yes, I made this also before Sarah chose a definition for the event. So overall, when we talk about largesse within the SCA, we're usually not talking about sort of acting with largesse, but we are usually talking about largesse as the actual physical things that get given. And so we use it kind of as a blanket term for all of the gifts that are royalty of every level. So from sort of that local baronial level all the way up to the kingdom are giving out. So gifts they're giving to newcomers, to event stewards, feast cooks, visiting royals, back to each other again. Those are all kind of collectively what we refer to as largesse. And we have all of these amazing folks who put their lives on hold for the duration of a reign and the months leading up to it to act as our royals. We can't really expect them to also make or purchase all of those gifts. It's a really, really big job. So that's kind of where all of the largesse makers come in to create these things that feed the magic of that portion of the game, because there is something really magical about having a princess hand you something from them, like from themselves, a gift. And so we get to sort of be behind the scenes making some of that magic happen.
I'm sorry. I wanted to sit in on this.
Okay, so we're going the what, when, why, and where out of order. So just bear with me here. But the why really is that idea of kind of everybody likes a present. And this is sort of the why we make largesse is kind of the behind the scenes of making that magic happen. And who can make largesse? Everybody can make largesse. Really, it doesn't take any specific skill level or skill set. And largesse you can make individually, or if you're like me, you can organize group projects, which is a really fun way, especially if you are a little bit less confident in your ability to make things to give. Is if your shire or barony or whatever your local group is can get together and make things together, it can be really fun. So when do we make largesse? You can make largesse anytime, but there are kind of some specific times when it's requested. So sometimes you'll hear about baronial taxes. So baronial taxes are something that is written into kingdom law that each barony group has a time when they present a gift of largesse. And so usually it'll be a lot of different things that have been made by members of the group, and they present it to the crown at that time as sort of proof that their lands are being held well and being productive. The other time they're kind of typically specifically requested is we often have largesse derbies. So you hear dirty dozen, delightful half dozen, sort of different names for that, but they are times when people can make duplicates of items. So 12 or 6, whatever the competition is, and people vote on them. And then usually you also get to take a piece of largesse home. And then everything else will be donated to the group that the largesse derby is for. So I've seen them for Kingdom. They're very frequent for, I know at least for Sinagua. And then also sometimes baronies will do them at their events. And then the other time that you actually, there might just be calls for largesse. Sometimes ahead of Interkingdom Wars, there will be a call for largesse because we usually have an exchange between the different royals of largesse items. Or if they're just kind of running low on things, you'll sometimes hear a call for specific types of largesse. So the sort of where of largesse, you can actually make largesse kind of at any level. So whether you're in a barony and are donating largesse to your barony, to your principality if you live in one, or at the kingdom level, you can also, if you're like me, you can totally make largesse as a gift when you visit another group and give it to them to be able to give out, because it's really fun to have things that weren't made by your people. And so one thing to kind of note, because it does come up as a question every once in a while, is that where largesse is physically given, outside of baronial taxes, it's not typically presented in court here in the West. Occasionally, but not very often. So usually it's best to kind of reach out to the largesse coordinator or head of court to sort of arrange delivery of largesse items. Okay, so we kind of covered the other aspects of like why and we are making largesse, but what do we make? So I think when you are going to make largesse, it's good to first consider a few things. And this is the thing that I think for me, needing to sort of prepare those gifts and be ready to give largesse out as a baroness has changed a little bit of my perspective when I think about considering these things. So the things that I think are really important to consider are going to be your audience. Who are gifts likely to be given to? And so gifts can be given to anyone in the SCA community. And so it's really important when we're thinking about creating largesse items that we're thinking about, does this kind of address a need in the audience? So are we making things that can be used by folks who are wearing garb of various genders? Are we making things that, you know, are we only ever making kid things? Or are we also making things that go for adults? All of those sorts of things. And sometimes asking about what's needed and what audiences maybe aren't as well served with the stock of largesse that they have is important. The next 3 points are all sort of interconnected, but storage, durability, and portability. We make stuff. The thing about that stuff is it then goes into a big plastic tote, possibly in the back of a trailer in Sinagua in the middle of the summer. It gets moved around to people's houses. It gets pulled out and put back and moved around a ton. So considering when you're considering what to make, thinking about, I know this has to be stored by somebody. Maybe I shouldn't make items that are very bulky, or maybe I shouldn't make items like for durability. Maybe I shouldn't make items that are very delicate, because I know that those totes need to get picked up and moved around quite a bit. So I don't necessarily want things that are very delicate. Portability. So maybe I don't want to make things that are super heavy, because people keep needing to move these things. Things that are very large or very heavy and unwieldy, unless they've been specifically requested, can be kind of challenging as Largess. Storage wise also, if there are things, consider that your donation of Largess might be sitting in a plastic tote in a trailer in the summer. So things that are temperature sensitive, things that can spoil, things that can melt. Sometimes, like, they're things to really consider when you're thinking about what to make. The next point that I like to think about is appropriateness. These are gifts that are being given within the SCA, in an SCA context. So they really should be things that are either sort of medieval in nature, or things that are going to support the activity of playing in the SCA. So you could have things like our little picture in the background here right now, our brooches. That would be an appropriate thing. They are part of, garb. They are appropriate to the time period, but something that is not period, but would be totally appropriate, are things like armor repair kits. And then also always consider if there are specific requests. Sometimes you will hear a call out for Largess, but they will say, but not any toys. We have a ton of toys. So it's a good idea to kind of listen to those things, because those are coming from, if they're coming from the Royals or from their Largess coordinator ahead of court, then they're the ones who can actually kind of see those bins of Largess and understand what they have. And if you're not sure, if you have an idea and you're like, I don't know if this is going to be appropriate, or you're like, I just want to make things that are really fulfilling a need that they're seeing in Largess, you can reach out to, many arenas have a Largess coordinator, but not all of them. I'm not sure if there is a Largess coordinator for the current reign at the kingdom level. But if you don't know who it is, or there's not one, you can reach out to the head of court at the sort of kingdom or principality level, or to your actual baronial coronet will usually be the contact at a baronial level. I have always lived in a barony. I'm not sure how much Largess type items that a shire might gather, although they still might need some in order to be able to sort of thank their event stewards. Okay, so some sort of general ideas for kind of that general Largess where you haven't been specifically requested. So haversacks, head to be bags, belt pouches. So these are vessels for holding things that are also gifts themselves. If you have ever stewarded an event or been the feast cook for an event, you probably received a bag of Largess. You open that up, and most of the time what you do is you open it up and you start giving things to the people who have helped you. So it's a wonderful thing to be able to have the bag that is also a beautiful gift, so that even if you emptied your whole bag of Largess out and gave it out to all the people who helped you in making the event happen, you still go home with something that is a gift for your hard work. Brooches and fibula, they're my favorite thing to make. I'm a fan. Those are really nice because they are truly functional items. Handmade toys, games, hoods, hats, and veils. Hats are often given as newcomers' gifts, so they are always an item that tends to be in demand. Jewelry and veil pins. Tools for creating. So when you think tools for creating, you're thinking things like, say, lucette forks, um, tablet weaving cards, that kind of thing, where they are tools to make things that are period. Thank you cards are wonderful. And trim and cordage. I am the Kingdom Regalia minister right now, and I will say everybody loves giving award tokens on handmade cords. So that is actually a really fun one that you can do as a group. And if you do decide to make cordage, about 36 inches. All right, so there are also some things that are probably a good idea to avoid, which are big, bulky, heavy items, unless they have sort of been specifically requested. Temperature sensitive items, items that expire. There is this lovely distinction of between things that are great gifts and things that are great largesse. So like I make olives. I can hand my friends jars of olives and that would be lovely. But if I had tried to put them in largesse, that would be a big hassle for somebody to deal with. So those types of items, we hate throwing out something that somebody has worked really hard on. But if you have items that expire, sometimes that happens. Really delicate items. The other thing, I have never met somebody raining who is like, I wish there were more tiny baskets. Could there be more baskets? More baskets. Whenever possible, it's a great idea to give largesse donations in bags. Baskets can look really pretty, but that person who's receiving it now has to deal with the basket and they have to figure out how to fit it in their car to go home. And now they end up with kind of a pile of baskets at the end of the rain. So again, unless you have been asked for it, it's generally a good idea to avoid baskets. Personally, when I give largesse, I actually take all the items and I put them in a Ziploc bag with a label. So, okay. So here are some examples of some largesse items. Most of these are from West Kingdom makers. So what you can see, we've got some nail binding needles, lucette forks, some little stuffies. I have a link to the pattern for the dragons later on. Jewelry items, trim, bags. This little picture down here with all the different goodies was actually a very cool thing that the steward for West Coast Culinary Symposium last year did, where she reached out to several makers and asked them to make items to gift to the teachers. So this was somebody's teacher's gift, but you can see there's a hand forged knife in there. There is this really cool, that white and yellow thing is a needle case. And there's some cordage. So it's kind of actually a really good view of sort of the interesting things. There's a book that somebody might make. Cup covers are actually a really functional item. And then hats. Hats are always quite popular. And I mentioned earlier about doing group largesse. This was something that my barony did in preparation for our taxes this year. And so we actually got together and made gifts or made largesse items as a group. And you can see we actually sort of labeled them with our barony cards. And then on the back of the barony card, we wrote what it was. And we actually noted that it was a group project because we kind of wanted people to know that was how that came about, was from us teaching each other how to do things. We made quite a few different items, but we made penannular brooches. That's what we're doing in that picture there on an old railroad, on old railroad ties. We made fibula or fibulae. And we made little gambling bags. We also made quite a few haversacks as sort of a team project where some people were cutting out and some people were sewing and some people were ironing, which is a really nice combo. And we made the bags that all of the little sort of gambling kits went into. Okay, so like I said, I make quite a bit of Largess and I really enjoy it. But there are some things that I think are really important to like remember, and these are kind of my tips and tricks to enjoying making Largess and also to making good Largess. If that makes sense. So one of the things, because we have those dirty dozen competitions, people get very set in the idea that they have to make a lot of something. There's no set amount that you need. It's actually very rare that folks are making multiple bags of largesse that are identical. There's not a common practice. And so it's okay and it's good to concentrate on quality over quantity if that makes you happier. Make things that you're proud of. Like make good items, make things you would be excited to receive as a gift. One of my favorite things as a largesse maker that I was told was when Tulia was Princess of Sinagua, she said, I want largesse that's hard to give away. I want things that I look at that thing and I'm like, oh, I want to keep it. I really, really want to keep it. So make things that you're proud of and that you would feel good about receiving. This is a big one. Label your art. Label it, label it, label it. All largesse should have a label saying what it is, what it's made out of, who you are, and where you're from. If somebody really likes something, they may want to try and contact you to get more of it, which is great. But also part of, especially when you're like doing your baronial taxes, you're showing off your group, right? So tell people where you're from. You don't know where your largesse will end up because the thing that you made, you know, that sewing kit that you made might end up in a gift that gets given to the king and queen of the middle, who maybe then give it to an event steward in, you know, another part of the known world. So when you receive something that came from somewhere far away, it's kind of cool. So you want to also give people that experience. Another thing is you don't have to wait for a competition. You can just make largesse anytime that you like. Conversely, you don't have to compete. If you are not in the mood to make largesse, you don't have to feel obligated to do it. And something that I touched on earlier, but that bears repeating, is that some things are great gifts, but not great largesse. Like things like pickles and jam are wonderful gifts if they don't have a destination right off the bat. Sometimes they're really hard. They're just difficult to deal with as largesse. We have to separate out all of our heat sensitive largesse because it's 115 during the summer here and our stuff is stored in a trailer. So we have to separate that out and put it aside. And if you are kind of giving a person that job without making sure that they want to be able to deal with that, sometimes that's hard. So if there are things that are very delicate, things that are going to spoil, things that really can't handle just being put in a hot car, then those are things to think about giving as a gift, not donating as general largesse. And then I really like to remember the chickens I didn't buy for Elsie model is what I like to think of this as, where if you are creating gifts that are going to a set of royals or something like that, try to make them things that are practical and useful and that they will enjoy. If they're people who have an animal in their heraldry may receive hundreds of stuffed animals of that animal. And so Some of them like it. Sarah's raising her hand. Some of them like it, and that's okay. But remember that it's also okay. The chickens I didn't buy for Elsie is when you see something and you're like, that reminds me of that person, but they probably don't actually physically want it. Remember that it's okay to take a picture and be like, this is great. I thought of you, and I want to give you this act of love of knowing that I thought of you, but I don't necessarily need to give it to you. The same can apply when it comes to not necessarily like for general largesse, but also when you're making something with a set of royals in mind. It's just something to keep in mind. Especially because the chickens I didn't buy for Elsie model was in fact a specific request. Often there will be requests. She said, don't buy me chickens. And so often there will be requests that we don't include arms of any sort on gifts because they think they might go out of kingdom. And so they don't want just a bunch of stuff that has the West Kingdom Populous badge on it. So those sorts of things are good to remember. And so some additional resources, if you are wanting to make largesse and connect with other largesse makers, we have the West Kingdom Largesse Makers Group. There's also an SCA Largesse group. If you are in or move to another kingdom, there are largesse making groups for almost every kingdom it looked like in the known world. I was looking for some websites that had some good, specifically just largesse stuff, and somebody sent me a link to Alyssa Heron. I think it's Lijon, I think is her SCA name, out of Avocal. And so she's got a site called Fellowship of the Things, and they do a bunch of largesse making. She's got the pattern for the little dragons, although that can be found sort of various places. And some other kind of cool largesse oriented stuff. It was a project for making largesse, the Fellowship of the Things. So that is my entire slideshow. So I'm gonna stop sharing screen, but I did, because if you have not been involved in as being the person who gives out largesse, I put aside we had to cancel our Yule event, and so I didn't get to give the gifts. So I wanted to kind of show you what you might find in one of those gifts, just because I think it's not always, you don't always know from the outside. Somebody else was making the haversack that this was going to go in, but I feel like this is fairly typical of the type of things that I have received, like as an event steward or a feast cook. So first off, you'll notice just about everything is in these little bags, which means that it is contained. Sometimes it's tempting to sort of package things in a way where things might catch on something. Having things set aside, and your group, if you ask, somebody might have a big stock of these. We discovered in our largesse bin when I stepped up that we have a bag of about 300 of these tiny little bags. So they are often out there floating around, but we have some glass beads, a needle book, a little bit of cordage, a necklace, some fibula. Oh, some stickers. So these are another item, not medieval, but if you are going to hand a gift to a kid, a little bag of dragon stickers is a fun gift, right? So consider audience. Some brooches. So that's a little like penannular brooch. Those are nice because sometimes it is challenging to find largesse or to find items that are appropriate for masculine garb. We often end up with a lot of veil pins. So I really like those brooches that give us something that is a little bit less gendered. And then these are kind of fun. Somebody made little key rings out of inkle woven trim. So if you happen to be a weaver and you don't necessarily have the gumption to like be weaving real quantities of trim that you could use for garb, things like sword keepers, which are little lanyards. These kinds of lanyards are a fun way to use that. I think one of the things I forgot to touch on that I should have is when I talked about how you label, if you find yourself being a person that makes a lot of largesse, one thing that is really, really handy is to order business cards. So these are my business card, like my largesse cards. And so they have that sort of information with my name, location, and then I just handwrite in my very sloppy writing, what the actual item is. And the other thing that I include on there is my contact information, because I also just use these as regular business cards when I talk to people at events and they might need to email me or something like that. I have a card that I can actually hand. And the other thing that you probably saw when I showed you some baronial group largesse is in those instances where there wasn't just a maker, we use our little baronial business cards, and they have all of our baronial contact information that they also include that same information of barony, principality, and kingdom. And then we just wrote on the back of them what the item was. And so those are also really handy. I have in the past also just printed tags on my computer, or you can just obviously write them. It just gets a little bit old if you make multiples of things. And then I mentioned that when I donate largesse, I usually do it in a Ziploc bag. So this is something that's kind of ready for donation. So I will put all of the like items into a bag and label it, because when I dig through my largesse bins, this is how I want to find things. So I'm kind of saving them the step of organizing things in that way. That I think is what I have for presentation. Does anybody have thoughts, questions, want to chat on this topic? Or not?
The other thing I would mention is I have the same do not buy Elsie the chickens, do not buy Sarah the sharks.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, right.
She was waiting, and I was like, maybe she wants sharks.
No, that's what it was. Is I got all the shark things. But what I told people too, I didn't need it, but some people really want to buy you something. And I say, well, take that money and make a donation to your charity. Or I gave them a charity, which is a shark charity. And I said, that is another option. If you have to, and you must spend your money, give it to somebody who really, it's not that I don't need it. They could use it more.
And also that idea of send a picture of the thing that you saw but you didn't buy actually really does scratch that itch of like, I want to buy the person the thing because I saw it and I thought of them and it gave me a good happy feeling. And so sometimes exercising that, because anybody that has an animal in their arms, Thorfinn, who has a pig in his arms, had this wonderful story about how he had like 200 stuffed pigs. People just kept giving them to him. And he reigned several times. They just kept giving him stuffed pigs. And he is like, I can't get rid of the stuffed pigs, but I also kind of don't need all of these stuffed pigs. 200, I'm sure, is an exaggeration. But, and then he lost them all in a breakup. And he was like, it was the best case scenario because I couldn't throw them away or donate them, right? Because people had picked these out for me. So that's another thing when it comes to the don't buy, like chicken I didn't buy Elsie model, is that there are many of us and only one of that royal at that moment. And so they'll often receive a lot of presents that are on theme. I also have a cup that a wonderful maker out of Lockhawk did that was a quote from somebody who has a penguin in, like, who likes penguins, I guess, but not to the point that she needs every single thing that she receives to be a penguin. And so I have a quote that says, I like penguins a regular amount. Because I think that is probably true of most people with animals on their arms, although all the hound dog things I'm fine with. Thank you.
If you're getting together for as a group and you're hosting, know that you need surfaces that are appropriate for the practice that or thing that you're going to make, like, you know, and have set aside guidelines about where people can do the projects.
That
Because
is a very good point.
the kitchen table might not be good for hammering, or I don't know, dyeing things maybe might not be good for the inside kind of stuff, depending
Yeah.
on the medium.
That turned out to be an incredibly fun project to come, like, to get
Yeah.
together as a group.
Yeah. It really brought our group together too. So it was really great to have like a common task. It was, the best thing I think.
Yeah, and in that note of make things that you're proud of and that you would feel good about receiving, is that after we did, I think we did about 6 or 8 weeks of weekly largesse nights to sort of get ready to actually pay taxes. The A lot of people came back and were like, oh, but can we do this again for us? Like, oh, can we make fibula again for us? Or can we make brooches again for us? So those sorts of things. If you are making a historical item, you can include some documentation if you like. I know I have some gifts that are set aside for some for like a royal gift at a war that it was requested that I send them the boob buttons that I made, right? And so, like, I'm like, these are a historical item and they're kind of a fun item and you don't normally see them because normally we just see Roman phalluses, but this is this other cool item. So I put in there information that they're based on, this extant item from this time period in this place. It's held in the Met. This is the Ascension number if they ever wanted to go and look. And that's also another fun way. There's this saying that people have that you can't get a laurel in largesse, which to a certain degree is probably true if what you're making are felt needle books. But if you are making things that are researched, it is also a way to sort of like just take art and be able to move it out into the world. Anybody else got anything? Sarah, stop recording me.
Okay, we will stop recording.
No,